Hi there. Today I'm going to do a different treatment on a familiar painting. I'm going to use the same sketch that I used in a Series 1 painting featuring the azaleas. This one is the one that we did previous, and I'm going to use the sketch out of the companion book, the exact same sketch, and we're going to paint. The flowers are going to be white and the background is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a dark, beautiful color that I'm really in love with right now, and that is American Journey Junebug. Really a beautiful blue-green color. That's the companion book that goes with Series 1, and this is what we're going to do today, something a little bit different. We're also going to be using a different kind of paper. I'm going to use a hot press paper, which is different from the 140-pound cold press paper. This one does not have any toothing on it. It's very smooth, and because it is a more dense and compressed paper, it does not absorb the paint quite the same. So a lot of people find it a little bit challenging to work with this, but it's kind of fun to use it every now and then, and it's great for detail work. So I think we'll have fun with this one. I've already got the sketch on it and we are ready to go. I did put a little bit of masking fluid right here where it extends into the background. This pistil extends into the background, so I don't have to worry about whether I paint over it or not. And I'm going to be using some salt, sprinkling some salt in the background as well. So we'll get that out in a minute. But I will start by just mixing up a very, very pale shadow color or first wash color with Payne's Gray and a little bit of Junebug in there, that blue-green color. And I want it to be super pale because I am going to put a couple of layers on there. And I won't show every detail that I do, but we'll get started. And remember, it dries lighter, so don't worry if it looks a little bit dark. I'm just going to put in a few initial washes here. And you see the smoothness of that paper. It's really interesting. It's great for pen and ink work if you like doing that. These are just very initial washes. They may be even a little bit too dark, but not to worry. You can always lighten everything when you need to. Basically, I'm just going to go around the flower petals. The thing about white flowers, a lot of times they're not really all that white. They have a lot of shadowing in them and a lot of very pale color to them. I just chose to use this gray color because I wanted it to sort of harmonize with the background, and that's why I put a little bit of Junebug in it. You can always smooth these out if you don't like these hard lines later. They're a little bit harder to smooth out on a hot press paper. You see it's kind of resting on the surface there. I will tell you that I've had this block for a very long time, and the paper was so dry when I did the original sample painting that this time I ended up wetting the entire thing and letting it dry overnight because I wanted to prime it a little bit. It was so dry, it was not absorbing the paint at all. It was kind of frustrating. Okay, we're going to go to the next area, and that is going to be some green leaves. We're going to quickly paint the green leaves. Some will be light green and some are going to be dark green. You can refer to your reference photo if you want to, or the reference photo that will be posted on here as well for this painting. I'm going to do light green ones first. I mixed some hooker's green this time. I used a sap green for the last painting. This one is going to have hooker's green with some lemon yellow in it. And then for the darker green, I will have hooker's green mixed with Payne's gray. You'll have to be careful if you run up against some of these wet spaces that we've just previously done just a few minutes ago. I'm going to try to leave the veins white as well, so I don't have to lift any veins out later. Also, you might find on hot press paper it's a little bit harder to get an even wash. See, it's almost resting on top of the paper. It does not absorb quite as fast. I will finish the rest of this. I'm going to have to let it dry just a little bit, but I'm also going to add a couple of extra leaves here and there in the background area. I'm going to let those dry, and I'm going to paint over most of them with the background color so it looks like they're fading in the background. But I'll go ahead and let some of this dry, and then I will continue to do the rest of the leaves, get that done. Okay, I'm ready to do the background. I have done some of the leaves, the rest of the leaves, and I added a few here and there. I did light green leaves, dark green leaves, and I also put in some branches. And I went ahead and did some of these stamens in a light green color. They're really pretty transparent in real life, but I wanted them to kind of show up a little bit, so I made them light green. And later I'll dot them with a little brown for the anthers. So I'm ready to do the background with that beautiful blue-green June bug color, and I'm going to use some salt with it. I'm going to sprinkle some salt, and I'm going to mainly concentrate it on the two corners, this corner and up on this section. Depending on how much of an effect you want with the salt, you can leave it on. I've left it on overnight. Usually I get too anxious, and after a couple hours I want to take it off. For time's sake, I will go ahead and leave it on there for a little while, and maybe we'll take some of it off if we start to see an effect. I'm going to wet it first. I'm going to go farther than I want to put the paint. I'm going to wet it with plain water first and extend it out just a little bit so it doesn't dry out on me and I don't get a lot of lines showing. I'm going to go over some of these leaves and not go over some of them. So we'll see how that goes, and it has to be very wet. That's why I am wetting it first. To get a good effect for the salt, you need to have it extremely wet. Another problem I may run into is that these leaves were just done a few minutes ago, and I would prefer them to be very dry. So we may get some running of the paint, we'll just see, but I'm just using this for demonstration. So when you do it, if you do decide to try it, I would let these thoroughly dry before I put the background on. I'm going to go over this one. Nice and wet. I have a fairly strong dilution of paint here. It's pretty strong. I like to start toward the middle and work outward, so I like it to be a little darker around the flowers. And I'm also on a slant, so it's running out this way. I'll have to be careful it doesn't run off the page. It may. I'm not going to really soak up all the excess because I want it to be real wet because of the salt. If it dries out on you, then you're not going to get much effect with the salt. It is buckling a little bit. I have some salt here, which has a little bit of rice in it. I try to dry it out before. You get a better effect if the salt does not have moisture in it. You can put it in the microwave if you want to for a couple of minutes and try to dry it out a little bit if you think it has humidity in it. Alright, I'm just sprinkling a little bit of salt. We're going to let that sit there, take effect, and I'm going to keep moving around the page. I'll go ahead and wet again. It's hard to go around these leaves with this big brush. I may go to a smaller brush. I can also see a problem here that I'm pretty light right there, so I might want to put a little more. You might be able to get away with, I don't recommend this, but you might be able to get away with throwing a little more paint on there. I don't care whether it's a real even wash. If I did, I wouldn't do that. The more interesting, the better on this one. Just let it do its thing. I'm just having too much of a time with this big brush. I'm going to have to go down to a smaller brush and go over this green one. And since it's not real dry, see, it's going to run a little bit. You will probably get some runs or blooms on this paper here. It's going to be very difficult to get a nice even one. I think I'm just going to leave that lighter. You see that green is definitely running because it wasn't completely dry. I'm going to go right over that brown branch and this green leaf here. You try not to work it too much even when it's very dry, but it's even worse right now because, see, it's not dry. But it's good for demonstration. I don't want you to mess up your paintings, but you can. I don't mind messing mine up. You notice I didn't put salt. I was going to try to leave the salt down in these areas here. I think I will stop for a minute, let this take effect. I'm going to have to mix up some more paint. That's something also to consider, to try to get as much paint as you need for this, so you don't have to stop in the middle of a background and mix up more paint. But I want to make sure I have a good amount that I put down in this corner because I'm going to put salt in here. So I'm going to stop for a minute, let that dry. Okay, there is a lot of detail work to do. I'll probably just tell you and demonstrate just a little bit and tell you most of it that will be done, and I'll post it when it's done so you can see what the end product is. And when you do it, especially on hot press paper, don't get discouraged when it's still wet because it can change quite a bit while it's drying, and when it dries it will look a lot better. So it looks a little bit strange right now because it's still wet, and I will have a little bit of difficult time working in the middle here with it still being wet, but there are a couple things that I can do right now. One thing that I want to mention is that you can really bring these branches out by making a darker edge down here on the bottom, and then just maybe do a little bit of dry brush method on it. For example, leave the upper edge lighter, just go along the bottom edge, and maybe just a few little marks on the branch. You can play around with that. That will help pop it out. See if I can do a little bit on this one. The others I painted over, but with this one and this one you can really make it pop by doing that. Another thing that I do is go over the whole thing and smooth out the edges by lifting. You can do that, for example, with this vein right here. You can even it out, just lift it, and it will look a lot better. Also, I have more shadowing to do on the flowers. I would go another round with a slightly darker color. You want to make sure that you can delineate each petal, and it's still wet, so I have to be pretty careful. You can go over the top of some of these others. You can also smooth the edges out on some of these too, so they don't have such a hard edge on them. You can just keep going around and around, and you can also smooth out edges too. That will help. I'm going to go ahead with the anthers and put those on. There should be 10. Just dot them with a dark brown, either a sepia or burnt umber. All right, got those. And then the 2 pistils, I'm just going to put some yellow on the end of them. You can either take, and I'm going to take this masking fluid off right now. You can use one of these or just pull it off with your finger. And I will just finish those. I think what I'll do is put just a little bit of the burnt umber there in with it. And the only other thing, besides going around these and adding more shadow and more depth to the flowers, I would do a little bit in the center. And then I'll go over it again with some gray. See my hand on that. You have to be very careful. I would wait until it dries. I would continue to work on these flowers, but I think it would be wise to wait until they dried. And the very, very last thing you would do would be to take the salt off. You can see some of the patterns forming here. I would wait until it dries thoroughly. You can either brush it off, but usually I have to use either a paper towel to get it all off, or I even just push it off with my finger, but I don't do it until it's completely dry. So that's the idea, a totally different treatment on the pink azaleas that were featured in Series 1. But these sketches are versatile. You can do a lot with them and just do all different things with them. So I hope you have fun with it.